How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Gimel, Daf 3 of Masechta BavaBasra. Friends, today is a gewaldige daf. The first part I think is kind of technical, Kind of a continuation of like yesterday, the Chotzer and stuff. But then we get to a gewaldige, like halach is turned into like a Gadata. Talk about King Herod. You ever heard of King Herod? We're going to hear the story about King Herod, his humble beginnings, his rise to power, his mean streak, and his rebuilding of the Holy Temple of Jerusalem. So, Chavit, today's going to be a packed daf. I'll tell you, it's a shtickle late. Hopefully I won't get too tired. But because it's a great daf. So now we're going to start on daf Gimel Amud Aleph. We're like pretty far into the Amud because where we ended yesterday was like halfway through the Amud, and then there was like a huge parentheses that we're just going to skip. So we're kind of far into the Amud, but we're also going to get far into daf Daled Amud Aleph. So here we go. We're going to start on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. I don't know, about somewhere between 5 and 10 lines before it gets wide. Right after the two dots, B'mai ukim to the Masnisan b'she'ein ba din chaluka. Wow. Okay, we got to get back into where we were yesterday. Okay. Okay, so our Mishnah says that you have these Reuven and Shimon have a courtyard of a chutzner. Their houses open up into the courtyard, and they put and they divide it up. Right? What does it say? Hashutvin shirotzu lasos mechitza b'chutzner. Right? That these two partners want to make a wall in the chutzner, and So really the question is, do we understand it? Is this Mishnah telling us that Hezek Riyah is Shmei Hezek or Hezek Riyah Lo Shmei Hezek? Okay, so first we wanted to say that Be'etzim Hezek Riyah Lo Shmei Hezek, essentially. That privacy isn't necessarily an obligation. But the second way to learn it was that Hezek Riyah Shmei Hezek. And the way that you will learn it that way is that when it says Ashutfin Shirotzu Lasos Mechitza, means Be'etzim Shirotzu Lachtzos. That meaning, or Shirotzu Lasos Mechitza means that they wanted to make a division. And then, if you're going to make a division, then you have to make a wall because Hezek Riyah Shmei Hezek. But now, Frekta Gemara, B'mayu Kim to the Masnisim B'she'em Din Chaluka. So there was an important point, which was that so if it's a big chutzner, so we say Hezek Riyah Shmei Hezek, that you have to be concerned about privacy, you have to build a wall. But we're talking about where it's a small chutzner, which means that if you divide it in half, there won't be 4 amas for each of them. So a chutzner that is so small, you don't have to divide up. But since they wanted to divide it up, sheratzu lasos mechitza b'chutzner, because they wanted to divide it up, that's why they divided it up, and then they have to make a wall. But now, Frekta Gemara, B'mai came to the Masnisin. So what did we say that the Mishnah is talking about? B'she'ein ba din chaluka, that it's talking about where the chutzner is not big enough to properly divide up. B'she'ein ba din chaluka, if it's too small, so in kiratzu mayhave, who cares that they wanted to make a wall? Nehajibu, let them just change their mind, right? Meaning, right, I'm sure that some of the Chevra over here at Babylon Talmud was wondering this. Meaning we were saying that, okay, once they want to make a mechitza, they have to make a wall. But what if they change their mind? And now they no longer want to? We're talking about a chutzner, right, that isn't big enough. Where am I? So Najibu, Amr of Asi, Amr of Yochanan, Shekanu Miyadan. They made a kinyan. A kinyan suder. But a kinyan suder isn't going to work over here because you're making a kinyan on words. You can't make a kinyan on words. You have to make a kinyan on a property, on an animal, on an object. Here, what are you making a kinyan on? On a decision to make a wall in a chutzner? You can't just make a kinyan on a decision. You have to make a kinyan on something. So, well, they made a kinyan about, I'm going to take this side, you're going to take that side. So I guess, I don't know, maybe Ruvain, I guess it would look like Ruvain picks up a Sudar. I don't know who's picking up what. I guess I don't exactly know what they would. How would this Kinyan Sudar work? I mean, who's giving what? I don't know. Like maybe Ruvain would give Shimon like a cloth, and Shimon would pick that up, and by Shimon picking up Ruvain's cloth, he's then saying, okay, Ruvain, you can have the east side, and then Ruvain picks up the cloth and says, all right, Shimon, you can have the west side. Maybe that's what they would do it, because otherwise, right? Because, if Shimon would have to pick up Ruvain's Sudar, and Ruvain would have to pick up Shimon's Sudar. So what exactly who's giving what? So Ruvain's giving Shimon a Sudar, and Shimon is giving what to Ruvain? I guess he's saying, okay, you can have that side. I imagine. Anyways, so that's how you'd be able to make a kinyan. Right, that they would say, okay, you have that side, I have this side. Rav Ashi Omer says, Rav Ashi, that if I understand correctly, they're not making a kinyan sudar, kigon she halach zeh besoch shelo v'hechzik, v'zeh besoch shelo v'hechzik. Each one went to their side of the chutzner, and they made a chazak on it. We're in BavaBasra. This is the Masechta we're going to talk about chazakas. Okay? In another few weeks, about another 4 weeks, almost exactly 4 weeks, we're going to get to Chezkas Abatim. And if I'm not mistaken, in Chezkas Abatim, we're going to talk all about chazakas. We've been learning about chazakas for the past 5 years. This is where we're going to discuss chazakas properly, I believe. But, okay, suffice it to say, Reuven goes into his side of the chutzner and he, digs epis in the ground, and Shimon goes to his side and digs epis in the ground, and they each mark their territory that way. Alright. Makim shenagu livnos v'chulei. Alrighty then. So we're talking about Gvil, Gozis, what was the other one? Something else, Levanim, Kfisin, Levanim. So Gvil, Avnei Dilo Meshapia. So Gvil is unhewn stones. Gozis, Avnei de Meshapia. Gozis is hewn stones. The Chsiv, as the Apostle says, called Eile Avonim Yikaris Kemidos Gozis. That these were hewn stones at a particular, precious hewn stones at their particular size. Kfisin Arche Levanin Livnei, and Kfisin are half bricks, Levanin are full bricks. Omele Rabba Brei Dirove Li Riv Ashi Mimai Digvil Abne Dilo Meshapio Ninu Vai Tefach Yisera Lemursha De Karnise. So when it comes to Gvil, we had said that these unhewn stones are 6 tfachim wide, and the hewn stones are 5 tfachim wide. The half bricks make a wall 4 tfachim wide, because you have a half brick is 1.5 tefachim, so you have 2 of them with a tefach of mortar in the middle. And the bricks, the proper bricks, are 3 tefachim wide. So now, here's the thing. Okay, so why are they the respective sizes? Well, okay, a hewn stone is, I guess, 5 tefachim wide, and a brick is 3 tefachim wide. How come the unhewn stone is 6 tefachim wide, and how come the half bricks are 4 tefachim wide? The reason is because the unhewn stones, you need like extra space to deal with like the corners they're like unhewn and they're like jagged and stuff. So you need, I guess, to like, get all the edges and stuff. You had to make a wider wall, and therefore it would be 6 tefachim. The reason why the half bricks would be 4 tefachim is because a half brick is a tefach and a half, and you would have 2 half bricks and a tefach of mortar in the middle holding them together. So that's why it would be 4 tefachim wide. So now what the Gemara is asking is, how do we know that an unhewn stone is essentially more or less 5 tefachim, but you have to make the wall wider because to deal with the jagged edges? Maybe an unhewn stone is 2.5 tefachim wide, and it's 6 and the wall is 6 tefachim wide. because you have to add a tefach of mortar in between, right? Just like by the half bricks, they're 1.5 tefachim with the tefach of mortar in between. Maybe the unhewn stones are half the size of the hewn stones, so 2.5 tefachim with a tefach of mortar in the middle. And maybe that's why it's 6 tefachim, not because of the edges, but because of the tefach of mortar. So, where am I? So, Amar le Rabbi Beidravle Rav Ashi Mimai de Gvil. How do we know that unhewn stones are avnei de lo mishapyaninu, or how do we know that they're unhewn stones? By tefach yiser lemursha de karnas, and the reason why it's 6 tefachim, where the hewn stones are 5 tefach thick wall, is because lemursha de karnasa, or in order to deal with the cover the jagged edges. Dilma palgo de gazes who, maybe it's half the size of the gazes, so 2.5 tefachim wide. By tefach yisera, and the extra tefach is levene orbe. Who? And the extra tefach is because you have 2 of them, so 2.5 each, and then you have 1 tefach in between. Like we say, kfisin arche, levenin livne, like we say that the kfisin are half bricks, levenin are full 3 tefach wide bricks. By tefach yiser, and the reason why the half bricks are a 4 tefach wide wall is levene orbe, because you need a tefach of a mortar between each of the 1.5 tefach wide half bricks. Amrlei. So Rav Ashi responds, according to you, kfisin arche minol, and how do we know that kfisin are half bricks? So we have a tradition that they're half bricks. So also, how do we know that gevil are unhewn stones? It's because we have a tradition for that as well. Okay, now we're gonna. It's very technical stuff. Now we're gonna have basically the same thing. It feels kind of like Erevini. I don't know. It's very technical stuff. That's why there was none of this in Bava Metzia. Bava Metzia, we were right now deep into Shnai Mochs and Betalos right now. Anyways, it's not good to compare the Mesechtas. But again, I just feel like if you're wondering why I loved Bava Metzia so much, I don't know. Bava Metzia, it was super hard, but there was always something going on. Ikadami, those who say, okay, I can't compare these Masechtas. Every daf is the best daf. Ikadami, those who say, Amar le Rav Achabre de Rav Avya, the Rav Ashi, those who say, says Rav Achabre de Rav Avya, the Rav Ashi, Mimadai kvisin orcheninu, how do you know that kvisin are half bricks by tefach yiser leveni urban, and the extra tefach is for the tefach of mortar to connect the 2 half bricks. Dilma, my kvisin avne dilo mishapyon, maybe the kvisin are just like unhewn bricks. By tefach yiser, and the extra tefach is the morsha the karnasa, is to kind of cover the edges. Kidaminan, like we say by gvil avne dilo mishapyon, like we say that the unhewn stones are unhewn stones. Gazis avnei dimshapid, and gazis are hewn stones. Vay tefach yiser, and the extra tefach by the unhewn stones is the morsha the karnasa, is to deal with the edges. Amalei. So Rav Ashi, was it Rav Ashi? Yeah, responds. The time gevil avnei dilo mishapid minolan. How do you know that unhewn stones are unhewn stones? El Gemara Gmirla. We have a tradition for it. Achanami Gemara Gmirla. We have a tradition, I believe, Alach Moshe Misinai, that these kfisin are half bricks, and that the reason why it's a 4 tefach wide wall is because of the tefach of mortar. Amar Abaye says, Abaye Shmamina kol beinei urve tefach, and Abaye says, so we see that the space between is a tefach, and the nafkamina is like if you're hiring somebody to build a wall with these half bricks, so the understanding is that it would be a 4 tefach thick wall because of the mortar in between the bricks, the half bricks. Hanimile betina, and that is when you have proper mud. Aval birichsa ba'itfei, but if it's like mud mixed with like pebbles and stuff, then you need more of it because it doesn't stick to the bricks as well. Vigidame hanimile birichsa. And those who say that no, when we say it's a tefach of in between the bricks, it's this richsa stuff that's like mud mixed together with pebbles and things of abatina. But if you have good, pure, geschmacke, tardika mud, So then lo baikuleh, then you don't need as much. Remember, is this to say that because this the whole dalit amis gova iava pusya chamsha koi ilo lo koi? So do we want to say that from this equation we would say, well, we're talking about a wall in a chatzor that's 4 amis tall, and we're talking about hewn stones that are 5 tfachim wide. So basically we have a proportion over here, that a wall that is 4 amis tall needs hewn stones that are 5 tfachim wide. But if you kind of build a 10 amma tall wall with hewn stones that are 5 tfachim wide, it'll fall over, because the physics won't add up. So basically we want to say the calculation is for every 4 amis of height, you need 5 tfachim of width. And therefore 8 amis of height would need 10 tfachim of width. Right, so again, so the member the begaz is this to say that when it comes to hewn stones called dalet amis gova, every 4 amis of height, you have a pusyo chamsho. If it was 5 tfachim wide koi, it will stand ilo lo koi, and if not, it'll fall over. Va'amatraxin. But what about the amatraxin? What about in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Bayis Harishon? There was a wall that was 30 amis tall and 6 tfachim wide, separate 1 amma wide, separating between the Kodesh HaKadoshim and the rest of the Heichel. Va'amatraxin da'avoy kavoya tlosin amasa. It was 30 amis tall. V'lava pusya elishis, and it was 6 tfachim. Right, shis pushche. It was 6 tfachim wide. So that's way off of our proportions. Right? We had said that once if it's even 8 amas tall, you would need 10 tfachim wide. Here we have 6 tfachim wide for 30 amas tall. What's the deal? Vikam, and obviously it stood. So kaven the ika tefach yisera koi. Well, so once already you have that 6th tefach, that makes all the difference. So if it's 5 tefachim wide, so you can only go 4 amas tall. But in the Beis Hamikdash it was 6 tefachim wide, a whole amma wide. So then you can even go up 30 amas. Uvimikdash sheni my taima lo avud amatraxin. So then why in the second temple was there no amatraxin? Now in the second temple, the heichal was 40 amas tall, not 30 amas tall. So they didn't make the amatraxin, they didn't make this wall, they only had a curtain. But why not? If it's 6 tfachim wide, it sounds like the sky's the limit in terms of height. Okay. Fine. Sorry, Mom. Kikoi betlosin koi tfelo koi. Well, it only goes up to 30 amas tall. You can't, it'll fall over if you go more than 30 amas. So if it's 6 tfachim wide, you can go up to 30 amas, not more than that. How do we know that the second temple was taller than the first temple? The Apostle says, "Gadol yiyek for abayis hazeh achrin min harishin," that this latter house will be bigger than the first. Rabbi Shmuel v'Amilah, Rabbi Yochanan v'Rabbi Elazar, Chad Omar b'binyan v'Chad Omar b'shonim. One opinion means that the second temple will be greater than the first temple in the actual physical building of it. So, for example, the first temple, the heichal was 30 amas tall. The second temple, it was 40 amas tall. As well as b'shonim. Rashi points out a Gemara from Masechta Yoma that the first temple stood for 410 years and the second temple stood for 420 years. So it stood for a greater number of years. And both are correct, right? The second temple was greater in terms of the physical structure as well as the length of time that it stood. But still, how come in the second temple there was a paroches between the Kodesh HaKadoshim and the rest of the Heichal? Why not, if we're saying that a wall that's 6 tefachim thick can stand 30 amas tall, so let's do that. Let's have this wall 30 amas tall, and the final 10 amas will be a curtain. We don't need to make the whole thing a curtain. So kikoi tlosin amosa nami, but still, when we say that a wall that's 6 tefachim wide was able to stand 30 amas tall, agav tikru mazeva havakoi, b'lo tikru mazeva lo avakoi. Interesting. I'm not a construction guy, but I guess it's apparently, I guess when you build a wall, so meaning in the Beis HaMikdash, this wall, in the Bayis Rishon, this wall that was 6 tefachim wide and 30 amas tall, that alone would not be enough physically for it to stand, but because it went all the way up to the roof, to the ceiling, / roof, I guess, and you have like a heavy roof leaning down, on top of it, so that kind of like adds pressure to the wall and holds it in place. So therefore, in the second, oh no, oh gosh, 1 second, I gotta turn off my headphones. 1 second. All right. Therefore, in the second, I don't know what I was talking about. I think I was talking about the second temple, right? The second temple, where the height was 40 amas tall. So then, if the wall went up 30 amas and didn't have the wall directly on the ceiling directly on top of it, it wouldn't have been able to held in place. And if there was a curtain for the rest of the 10, so the wall, there would be nothing securing the wall, and it would fall over. But still, why do we need the division to be 100% curtain? Why not just build the wall as tall as it will go as a physical wall, and then the rest you will make a curtain? Abaye says, Abaye, Gemire ikulu bebinyan, ikulu beparochas. Well, because I guess we have the tradition that either it's entirely a wall or it's entirely a curtain. Ikulu bebinyan mimikdash, ikulu beparochas mimishkin. That, for example, where are we learning from? Well, the first temple was entirely a wall. The Mishkan was entirely a curtain. So we see either you make it entirely a wall or entirely a curtain, not a combination of the two. Ibarlu, that's a kasha. Hein v'sidon, odilma hein below sidon. Okay, when we're talking about these widths, right, 6 tefachim wide, 5 tefachim wide, 4 tefachim wide, 3 tefachim wide, is it with their plaster? Is it 3 tefachim wide? A brick is 3 tefachim wide, including its plaster that you put around it, or is that just the brick, but the plaster would add to the length, to the size? It makes sense that it's 3 tefachim total, right, including their whatever plaster you put around it. Because if it enters your mind that it means without the plaster would make it more than 3 tefachim wide, so then well, then that should be included, right? If we're talking about these sizes, then also the plaster should be listed as part of the sizes. Therefore, it must mean that we're talking about a total of 3 tefachim wide for these bricks. No, really, I'll say that the 3 tefachim is not including the plaster. The reason why the plaster wasn't listed in the Mishnah, even though it would have to be added, is because it's less than a tefach. So it wasn't significant enough to list. Katoni bilevenin zenosin tefach v'mechzo v'zenosin tefach v'mechzo. But by the bricks, right? We mentioned that the half bricks there would be by the bricks, which are 3 tefachim wide, each would give would contribute a tefach and a half. So we're talking about half tefachim over there. So hasam chazil itztarufe, well there, because you have 2 half tefachs which can join to be 1 tefach. But over here we're just talking about little bits of plaster. Okay, fine. Okay, so now, Toshma, come in here. Hakora she'amru Erevin. If we weren't sure if this was Erevin, well, now we're sure that we're sure that this reminds us of Erevin because we're talking about a mavui now. A mavui. Oh my! Remember Masechta Erevin? You have a mavui that opens up into Rishus Harabim, and the Chatzeros open up into the mavui, and you have to, in order to carry the mavui, you have to make a heker so you don't carry from Rishus Harabim to the mavui. So you put up either a lechi or a korah. A korah is a beam that goes from one wall to the other wall. So we're saying, a korah she'amar, when we're talking about this beam, rochba k'dei lekabel ariach, it has to be wide enough to receive a half brick that is 1.5 tefachim. The ariach chatzi leveino shel gimel tefachim is half of a brick that is 3 tefachim. Meaning, if you have a brick that is a full 3 tefachim, well, that is what we're talking about. When we're talking about nariach, it would be half of that, i.e. a tefach and a half. So, okay, so we want to say for now what that means is that, so we see that the brick is not including the plaster, and therefore here also the brick is not including the plaster. So also in BavaBasra, no, there it's dafka talking about a large brick, meaning from the fact that over there in Erevin, it dafka points out not just a brick, but a 3 tefach wide brick, implying that there's some kind of other brick. Yeah, the kind of other brick is that when the brick itself isn't 3 tefachim wide, but the brick plus the plaster is 3 tefachim wide. Where are we talking about that? We're talking about that here in our Mishnah, that the 3 tefachim wide includes the plaster in our Mishnah, like Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak was saying. Alright, so now things lighten up. Yeah, I'd say lighten. They become much less technical, in my opinion, more interesting. Alright, here we go. Omer Rav Chizda says, Rav Chizda, lo lister inish beknishta ad debani beknishta achrise. It says Rav Chizda that one should not knock down one synagogue until the other synagogue is built. So you shouldn't have a scenario where there's any point where you don't have any synagogue at all. You could also say mishum pshiusa, because we're concerned that maybe ultimately you'll end up being negligent, or for whatever reason you won't end up building the new synagogue and you'll be left with nothing. And some say, well, because you need a place to daven. If you knock down the synagogue, where are you going to daven when you're building it? So even if you do end up building it, there's going to be the interim period where you won't have a synagogue. So my benayu ki benayu de'ika duchto letzaluye. The nafkamina is if you have a place to daven. So if you knock down the synagogue and while you're building the other synagogue, you have a place to daven. So that's the nafkamina. If you say it's about negligence, well, you still might be negligent and not build the new one. So the fact that you have a place to daven doesn't solve that. But if it's about where you're going to daven, well, we have you a place to daven, so that's not a concern. Meremer Umar Zutra, so it sounds like Meremer Umar Zutra subscribed to that it's about having a place to daven. Sasre uvanu bekaito besitva, uvanu besitva bekaito. Very interesting. I guess it sounds like, they didn't have air conditioning or even fans at the time, at least not electric fans, I guess. So it sounds like they would have 2 different synagogues, one for the summer, one for the winter. The summer one, I guess, was more airy, and the winter one was more insulated. So they would have 2 separate synagogues, one that was suited for the summer, one that was suited for the winter, and they would do construction on the winter one during the summer and the summer one during the winter. So if the concern was about negligence, well, who cares that it's the summer one or the winter one? I mean, you can't knock down a synagogue because what if you don't end up rebuilding it? What are you going to do? But if it's about having a place to daven, well, if you knock down the winter one in the summer, well, you're not using it anyways right now because you have the summer one that you're using, so that's not an issue. Ravina, where am I? What if they collected the money for the synagogue and deposited it? Would that be enough, to not be concerned about negligence? They already collected all the money. So Omar lei duma misamilu pidgin shvuyim v'yayvilu. Well, what if they need to redeem hostages? And then they're going to take all that money and they're going to use it to redeem the hostages. But then they're going to be left without a synagogue. So no, you still can't knock it down, even though you've collected the money. Shrige livne v'hadre hudre umachte kshure. They got bricks and beams and rafters, and they already got all the tools together. They already spent the money. They bought tools and they bought materials and everything. So can you assume at that point that you can knock down the synagogue? Because you already bought all the materials to build a new one. So again, so Rav Ashi says that, but still, if there's a scenario of pidgin shvuyim to redeem hostages, so they'll sell those materials, and again you'll be left without a synagogue. If that's the case, afilu banu nami. Well then, even if they already built the new synagogue, they shouldn't be able to knock down the other one, because what if there's pidgin shvuyim? You'll sell the synagogue. Omar lei, so Rav Ashi says, dirte de inche lo mizabne. That but you don't sell your home. You're not going to sell your home for pidgin shvuyim, and therefore you're not going to sell the shul. If the shul isn't yet built, so even if it's materials, they already bought the materials, still you'll sell that. But once it's built, you're not going to sell it, and you don't have to be concerned about not having a synagogue. V'lamar and ella delo chazi ba tiyua, and that is only if there were no cracks in the original one. Chazi ba tiyua, but if the original one is cracked and dangerous, well, then you could knock it down. Sasa Yuvane, they could knock it down and build a new one. Ki other Rav Ashi, it's like Rav Ashi chazaba tiyua b'knishta demat mechasya, that Rav Ashi saw that there were cracks in the synagogue of Matamachasya. Sasre, so he knocked down the synagogue. Ve'ayu lefurye lahosam, and he brought his bed there. He moved in. He brought his bed there. V'lo afke ad demaskin la le shviche, and he lived there until they put the final touches on the new synagogue. That he wanted to make sure that once they knocked down the synagogue, that they were going to rebuild it, and that he was going to move in there and, move out of his home and move there to make sure that he was going to make sure that it got rebuilt, right? Because obviously he wants to move back home. He was basically inconveniencing himself to move there to make sure that, as incentive, to make sure that the project gets wrapped up as soon as possible. Now, Ubava ben Bute, Echi Asve le eitzo lehurdis lemistre leveis hamikdosh. How could Bava ben Bute have advised King Herod to knock down the second temple to build his binyan hurdis, the temple of Herod? How could Bava ben Bute have advised him to do that? For Amar of Chizah says lo lister inish bekinish ta adebani bekinish ta achrina. Achrisa, that you can't knock down a synagogue until you have a different one. So how could Bava ben Bute have advised Hurdus to knock down the Beis Hamikdash to build a new one? One option is that Bava ben Bute noticed that there were cracks in the second temple, and therefore it had to be fixed. It had to be rebuilt. Alternatively, Malchusa Shaini, that it's different when it comes to a king. Delo Hadrabe, because kings don't run back from their commitments. The Omar Shmuel, that Shmuel says, the Omar Malchusa Akarna Torah, that if a king says, I'm going to uproot a mountain, Akar Torah V'Lahadrabe, he's going to uproot that mountain, he won't not uproot that mountain. And therefore, Bava ben Bute was able to advise Hordus to knock down and then rebuild the second temple, because it was backed by a king. It was gonna get done. Now here is the story of Hurdus, how he rose from being a slave of the Hasmoneans to being the king of Israel, who rebuilt the second temple. It's not a pretty story. Hurdus avdo de beis Chashmonoi avo. Herod was a slave of the Hasmonean dynasty, in the Hasmonean family. Havanosin ena ba'osa tinokis, and he was attracted to a particular young girl of Hasmonean lineage. Yom echad shama ha'ugaver bas kalo de Omar, and one day Herod heard a heavenly voice that said, Kol abdu de morid hashto matzlach, that any Eved who rebels right now will succeed in his rebellion. Herod did not miss a beat. Kom kotlinu nichulu marvose. He killed all of his masters, all of the Hasmoneans. V'shayra le'ayi yenuksa, and he left just that one girl who he was attracted to. Ki chazos ayi yenuksa, when this girl saw the kaboy lemin saba, that Herod wanted to marry her, slika le'igra, she went up to the roof, v'rama kala, and she cried out, Omar, she said, Kol man de osi ve'omar, if ever somebody comes and says, Mi beis Chashmonoi ka'asina, that I come from the Hasmonean family, Avdahu is really an Eved, de lo ishtayra minayu, elai yenukso, because I am the sole survivor of the beis Chashmonoi, ve'yenukso, nafla me'igra le'ara, and then she jumped off the roof, and that was that. So there's no more people from the Hasmonean lineage. Tomno sheva shnim biduvsha, and for 7 years Herod preserved her in honey. One opinion is that he had bia with her when she was being preserved in honey, and the other opinion is that he didn't. Those who say that he had bia with her, hatamna lisuve liyitzre, he preserved her in order so that he can do what is Yetzer Hara's desires. And those who say he didn't have bia with her, the reason why he preserved her, so that the people will say that Herod was married to a princess. He was married to the daughter of a king. Therefore, he's a legitimate king. He was married to the daughter of a king. Omar, then Herod said, Man darish mikarev achecha ta'asum alecha melech. Who's the ones who say that a king must come mikarev achecha and it can't be an Eved? Rabbanan, it's the rabbis who say that. It's the rabbis who look at me and say that I can't be king, that I'm illegitimate. Kom katlinu lechulu rabbanon. So he went and he killed all of the rabbis. Shavke lebove ben Buta, but he left just Bove ben Bute. Lemishkol etzamine, so that he can ask advice from Bove ben Bute. Ahadu le klilo dayole nakrinu le'ene, and then he he took porcupine hide with all the needles and stuff, and he wrapped it around his head, and he was blinded. The spikes blinded his eyes. And Bav ben Buta was only one of the Rabbanan who were left, and he was blinded by Herod. Yom Echad also Yosef Kame, and one time Herod went and he wanted to instigate with Bav ben Buta, who was blind. He wanted to start with him. He wanted to tempt him, to trap him. Yosef Kami, and Herod sat before Bav ben Buta, Omar, and he says to Bav ben Buta, now of course Bav ben Buta can't see him, so Herod was trying to pretend like he wasn't Herod, like he was just another Jew. And he was instigating and saying to Bav ben Buta, do you see what this silly slave is doing? Referring to Herod, he was pretending he was a Jew, complaining about Herod. Omarle, so Bav ben Buta says, who I guess technically doesn't know that it's Herod, my avidle, well, what do you want me to do about it, says Bav ben Buta. Omrle nalti emar. So this, we'll just call him this Jew, who's really Herod, pretending to be this Jew, but this Jew says, this supposed Jew says, I want you to curse Herod. Omrle, Ben Buta says, Ksiv, Gamid bimado acha melech atakal. Even in your thoughts, don't curse a king. Omrle, so this supposed Jew says, Hai lav melechi, but he's not a king. He's a slave. Omer v'lavi osher ba'almo. So Buddha says, okay, fine. And let's say he's not a king. He's a wealthy man. Uchsiv v'chadrei mishkavcha atakal osher. And that even in your bedroom, do not curse a wealthy person. V'lo ye'elanasi. Alternatively, he's at least a prince. Uchsiv v'nasi ba'amcha losar. Do not curse a prince in your nation. So the supposed Jew says, but it says, you can't curse a prince who is being be'amcha, who's doing like what a person in your nation is supposed to do. But Herod, he's obviously not doing what he's supposed to be doing. He killed all the rabbis. Buddha says, still, I'm scared. I don't want, I'm not going to do anything to Herod. To which this supposed Jew says, come on, who's going to tell Herod? It's just me and you right now. And Bav Ben Buta says, well, the pasuk says, that the birds in the heaven will bring forward the voice. And a bird will rebel against your word, maybe. So Rav Ben Buddha says, no, I'm not going to do it. So Amalei Anahu, at which point Herod reveals himself, and he was significantly, he was sufficiently impressed and more by Bav Ben Buddha, and he says, if I would have known at the time that I killed all the rabbis that they were so careful and sensitive, lo hava qatilna lehu, I wouldn't have killed them. Hashtamai takante daugavra, what can I do to fix this terrible thing that I've done by killing all of the rabbis? Amalei Bav Ben Buta says to him, Hu kava oro shel olam, will you extinguish the light of the world? The Apostle says, Ki ner mitzvah v'torah or, that a candle is a mitzvah and Torah is light, and the Talmidei Chacham study Torah and you kill them, so you extinguish their light. Yelech v'yasok ba'or shel olam, so go and busy yourself, immerse yourself with the light of the world, as the pasuk says about the Beis Hamikdash, v'naharu elav kol hagoyim, that all the nations will come to it. I assume that, right, they will stream to it, and I assume nahar may become, the point maybe is that, like nahora, which means light, maybe is the point. They also say, this is what Bav Ben Buta says, Husimei eno shel olam, that Herod blinded the eyes of the world. The pasuk says, the oya imei enei eda, that if it will be from the eyes of the congregation of the rabbis. And Herod, you should busy yourself with the eyes of the world. The pasuk says, Hineni mechalel es mikdashi gon uzchem machmur einechem. That it says about the Eibishter says to Ezekiel that I'm going to destroy my temple, your strength and the desire of your eyes. Herod says, but I'm scared of the kingdom in Rome, right? He's still had to answer to Rome. I don't know that they're going to be on board with me rebuilding the temple of the Jews. Above Ben Buta says, Shlicha v'lezel shata. Well, why don't you send a messenger to Rome to consult with them and to ask them if this would be okay? And this messenger will go, it'll take him a year to travel, v'le'akiv shata, let him stay there for a year, v'le'hadar shata, let him travel back for a year. He'll be gone for 3 years. And during that time, Sasr's lay, destroy, knock down the Beis Hamikdash, Uvanyas lane, you'll rebuild it. So Herod did this. And he sent this messenger, and Rome sent back with the messenger. Right? In the meantime, Herod rebuilt the second temple. So from Rome they sent back to Herod, Im los asarta al tistor, if you haven't yet knocked it down, don't. Vim satarta al tivne, and if you have already knocked it down, don't rebuild it, just leave it knocked down. Vim sasarta vanisa, and if you knocked it down and already rebuilt it, which he did, and they were kind of like hinting at that, like, we know what you're doing, we see through your plan. Avda bisha, a bad eved, Basar de Avdin mismalchin, only after they do they ask permission. You son of a gun, we know you rebuilt the temple, and then you only asked us after the fact. Im zayncha Allah sifrecha kan, if maybe you have your weapons with you, and maybe you were so strong that you were able to defeat the Hasmoneans, we know who you are, your book is here with us in Rome. Lo reicha v'lo bar reicha, you're not a king, you're not the son of a king. Hurdus avda, you slave, Herod. Kalanya misabed, you freed yourself from slavery, that's who you are. My reicha, what does reicha mean? Malchusa, it means king, king. Dichsiv anochi ayom rach, umashuach melech, I am today rach, and appointed as the king, so we see that reicha is king. By same alternatively, by Yosef HaTzadik, it says, Ema me'acha va'ikru l'fan of Avrech. That they referred to, right, when Joseph was made the viceroy, they called him the Avrech, so we see that Rach is like a kingship. Amri, they say, Mishal Ra binyan hordis, lo Ra binyan noah miyomov. They say that he who has never seen the temple of Herod has never seen a beautiful structure, a beautiful building in all of his days. That's how beautiful, that's how remarkable, how marvelous and splendid the temple of Hordis was. But my banya, what was the construction? It was with green marble and white marble. He could also say blue marble, green marble, white marble, apik sofa v'ayil sofa. One row would be in and one row would be out. That was like a fancy method of construction. Instead of having to build the walls with like mortar in between the walls, and you see in between like the rows of bricks of stone, and you see the mortar. Instead, he lined up all the stones next to each other, but one row would be in, one row would be out, in, out, in, out, and then behind the scenes in the back, he would fill the mortar from the back, so everything would all be connected from the back, but from the front you wouldn't see any of the mortar. Ki heichi dinikabel sida, so that in the back you would fill the back with the mortar and keep everything together. So for the Mishai Bedaiva, and he then thought that he would cover it all in gold. Amule Rabbanan, the rabbi said to him, Shavke, no, leave it like this. That this is more beautiful. The Mechzeki, Idvusa Diyoma, it looks like the waves of the sea, with the blue and the green and the white and the in and the out. Ubava Barbuta Eichi Overachi. How is Bava Barbute able to give this advice to Herod? Right, Herod had killed all the rabbis. He realized that he had made a humongous mistake. And he asked Bava ben Buta, well, what can I do to fix it? How could Bava ben Buta tell him what he could do to fix it? How come Daniel was punished? Because he gave advice to Nebuchadnezzar. Shneimar, the Apostle says, Lein Malki Yishvar, that to the king Nebuchadnezzar my advice will be useful. V'chatorch b'tzedakah pruk, and your sin, remove it with righteousness. V'avosech, I think it's v'avosech. V'avyosech. B'meichon anyon. And, the bad stuff that you've done, be generous towards the poor people, and that will help. And that will sort of extend your good fortune. The Apostle says, Kulamato on Nebuchadnezzar, everything that was meant to befall Nebuchadnezzar ultimately befell him. But it was delayed by 12 months. And Daniel got punished for offering this advice to Nebuchadnezzar to delay his punishment by 12 months. So how was Bava ben Buta able to give advice to Herod after the terrible thing that Herod did? You can say, Shani Avdo Dichai b'mitzvahs. Well, Herod was different than Nebuchadnezzar because Herod was an Eved, and Eved Kanani is Chai b'mitzvahs, like an Isha. Alternatively, Shani Beis HaMikdash, that it was different when it came, because what was the advice that Bava ben Buta gave Herod? To rebuild the temple. The Ilo Malchus Lo Mizbinei, that you need a king to back the rebuilding of the temple, and how else is it going to get rebuilt? Especially if we said that maybe Bava ben Buta saw that there were cracks in the temple, that it was in need of repairs. So, right, it had already been standing for hundreds of years, I guess. So it needed repairs. Who's going to repair it? Where's that kind of money going to come from? Where's that backing going to come from? You need a king to do it. So therefore, Bava ben Buta figured this was the only way that the necessary work was going to be done to the temple. How do we know that Daniel got punished? Well, maybe because the passage says by King Esther, that Esther called out to Asoch. Rav Asoch said Daniel. This is when Mordechai was out fasting, so wearing the sackcloth, sakva efer. So V'Amar Rab, Asoch said Daniel, and says Rab that Asoch is Daniel. So this makes sense if we say that his name was Asoch because they cut him down from his greatness. Okay, so we see that he was punished. But according to the other opinion, which said it's fakir, that he was called Asoch because all of the kingly decisions were made by his right nechtochen. They were cut by his word, that they would go based on what he says. So Michael Mimmer, so how do we know he was punished? Well, of course, Daniel was thrown into a pit of lions. That sounds like a punishment to me. Woo! Wow! You know what? I'll tell you, Bava Metzia was amazing, not to compare. But a daf like this kind of a got to really get into it and get excited about. I feel like, I'll be honest, that is something that like maybe we didn't have it. I feel like we haven't had that as much in the past few months because everything has been so intense with Bava Metzia. To have just a beautiful page of Agadah, I think there's going to be a lot of Agadah. We'll have to see. I never really learned. I never learned BavaBasra except for little parts of it. There might be a lot of starke Agadah over here. Anyways, the beginning of the daf, we talked about some very, very technical stuff about bricks and things, but then we got into halachis of a synagogue. When can you knock down a synagogue to build a new one? We said Rav Chizda says you can't knock down a synagogue unless the other one's already rebuilt. We said, why? Maybe because we want to make sure that you're really going to rebuild it. Alternatively, maybe, well, where else are you going to daven? But if you have a place to daven, then maybe it's taka okay. And we said if the original building has a crack in it, then it's okay. Then we got into the whole story of Hurdus, of Herod, where he came from, how he called all the rabbis, and how he tried to fix that by rebuilding the temple. And they said that the temple of Herod was the most amazing structure you've ever seen in your whole life. And that was some interesting stuff. Peace out.